Don't miss a beat, join the notification squad by clicking that bell. You'll get notified every time I upload a video, and be sure to join our Discord to talk and get help with your code.
Hello everyone, my name is Sebastian. Welcome back to a brand new video on the SourceCode channel. This is episode 7 of the Vue.js tutorial series, and in this video I'll be showing you how you can make an infinite scrolling application so that you load a couple of elements, then you scroll down and it will load more elements. And the reason for doing that is that when you load a lot of stuff, it's going to slow down your application. So you want to load a small chunk of things, but you don't want to have the user to click an icon to load more stuff. You want that to be automatic, and that is because the user will have to do less, which will make them continue using your application, and they are less likely to stop using it. So for that we need a couple of things. So we need to detect when we need to load more. So when they scroll to the end of the page, we need to start loading more. And yeah, so let's just get right into it. So we want to start off by initializing our project. So if you haven't already, type npm i vue-cli -g. If you followed episode 6, you don't have to do that. You already have it installed. And then you can run vue and then init webpack. And that will initialize our project. And we want to do it in this directory. Then we want to name it vue because it has to be all lowercase letters. So this is just an easy name. Product description, author, yes. We want to use runtime plus compiler. We don't want the router. We don't need slint right now. We don't need unit test, and we don't need end-to-end. And yes, use npm. And this will just load all the stuff that it needs. It will download a bunch of packages, and I'll get back when it's done. The packages have been installed, so now we can start the application by running npm run dev. And it will download the last final things, and then it will start our application. We can start using it. So then when we go back to our editor, you can see that there's a bunch of files which have been created. And what we want to do is we want to delete hello world.vue. We don't need it. And then we can remove this import, remove this from the components, and remove this stuff, and that will just clean up everything that was here before, which we don't need. So there's a couple of things that we want to use for this application, and the first thing we want is an observer, and we'll be using intersection observer for this, and this is the right page. So it's an intersection observer, and what this does is it emits an event whenever you are intersecting with this object or with a specific element. And this allows us to see when the user scrolls to the end of the page, so we can emit an event and more stuff can be loaded. And what we'll actually do is we will create our own event for a component, which means that you can change what will happen when it's intersected with. So to get started, we want to create a new component. So in our components, we want to type a observer.vue, and then we type template, and we can just remove this language. We don't need that right now. And we can start creating this observer. So first thing we want to do is want to give our observer the name observer, and then we want to create a data function. And this needs to be a function because of it being a component that can be reused. And I explained that in the last episode, episode 6. So if you don't understand it, go watch that episode. So we say observer, which is null, and that will make it so we know we have an observer variable. So then we want to add a mounted function, and this mounted function will be called whenever the component is mounted to the screen. And I talked about that in an earlier video, which is the lifecycle hooks. And what we can do right here is we can create a new observer. So what we want to do is we want to say this.observer equals a new intersection observer. So this observer wants a parameter and it wants a function to be passed in. And the parameter of the function is an array, but we only want the first parameter of the first index of the array. So what we can actually say is like this. And for instance, when we get 1, 2, it will rename this to entry and only give us entry. So we'll give the first index of the array. And then inside of here, we want to say if entry, to check if it's set, and entry does is intersecting. And then we can console.log intersect. So whenever this is intersected with, it will log intersect. And then what we want to do is we want to say this.observer.observe. And then we want to observe the current element. So we want to observe the current component that we have. And what we can actually do is we can say this.$L. And this is something that Vue puts on the this object. And it's a reference to the element that's inside of this template. So then inside of here we want to just create a div with the class of observer. And we don't want to put anything inside of it because observer just needs to be a thing that exists. It doesn't have any visual stuff. So when we go to our site and we load, we will see nothing will happen because we don't add the component to our page. So to do that, we go to our app.vue and we import observer from /components/observer. And then in components we can say observer, and then inside of here we can say observer as well. So then when we go to our page, we can see right away it logs intersect, and that is because currently the observer is somewhere around here. It's not visible, but it's somewhere around here. So as soon as we load the page, we are already intersecting it because it's visible on our screen. So what we can do now is we want to create an event that will be fired whenever it intersects. So what we can do instead of console.log intersect is we can say this.$emit intersect. And this function emits the intersect event on this component, which will then execute all the event handlers that are set for this component and this event. So then on our component, we can say v-on intersect equals, and then the function intersected. And this will call a function, so methods, and then intersected. And then when we say console.log intersect, and we go back, we can see that it still logs intersect, but we don't log it from our component, but we log it from our app because we listen to the intersect event. So we can also change this to hello, and we only have to change the implementation, and we can use different handlers for each observer. So what we want to do now is we want to load a couple of things that we want to display on the page. So we, for instance, want to load 10 comments in this case, and then when we scroll down we want to load another 10. So for this I'll be using JSON placeholder again. I used that in a different episode as well, and we're going to use the comments section. And what you can actually do is after this URL, jsonplaceholder.typecode.com/comments, so we can say underscore or a question mark underscore page equals 1, and it will display 10 elements. And when we go to page 2, it will display 10 different elements. So what we want to do is we want to fetch the stuff from this API. So intersected should be a asynchronous function since we're going to use await, and we're going to say const res equals await fetch, and then take this URL. And for now I'll leave out the page so we can see what it actually does. And then we're going to say const items equals await res.json. So then when we console.log items and we go to our site, we will see that 500 comments will be loaded, but that is really slow. So what we want to do is want to add pages. So I'm going to add a data function again, and this data function will have a page number which will be set to 1 because we want to start at page 1, and then we want to load page 1 by saying !_page equals, and then change this to template literals, and then this.page. So this will just load the first page and it will return 10 elements. So when we go back to our page, we can see the first 10 are loaded in. So now what we want to do is we want to place all these elements onto the web page. So I'm going to create a component for each comment. So comment.view, and I'm going to say template, remove this stuff, and then I want to check what is in this object. So what we want is a post ID, an ID, a name, a email, and body. So I'm just going to say props equals a post ID number, ID number. We had name, email, and body. Name is a string, email is a string, and body is also a string. And then we give this a name, which is going to be comment. And then we have the object laid out. So each comment will be each one of these parts. So then in the template we want to put a div, so class comment, and then we want to have a header with the comment name, and then a p with the body. So then inside of our app we want to import comments from /components/comments, and then we want to add it to our components, and then inside of here we want to say comment, and then v for each item in items. We want to v bind item to comment, which will put all of the information inside of here, and then v bind key to item.id. And then the only thing is that we don't have an items object, so this won't actually do anything. So inside of our data we want to return items, which will be an empty array, and then when we go to our page it will still be empty, and that is because we don't put our elements inside of these items. So what we want to do is we want to put items inside of this array, and there's a couple of ways to do this. I'll be doing this way, which might look a bit strange, but it uses the spread operator, which basically merges these two arrays together. So it takes all of the items out of this.items and appends all the items out of items. So when we go to the page, we will see that already a couple of elements have been loaded. And when you scroll down, we will see that it does load something because we continue scrolling, but we also get a lot of errors, and we can see that we are loading the exact same things over and over again. And that is because we don't update this.page. So it will always load page 1, which is not what we want. So what we want to do is we want to say this.page++, which will load page 1, and then add 1 to page, which will make it 2. Then next time it will load page 2, then make it page 3. And then we will see that every time we load different comments. So when we reload, we can go scrolling, and we can see that if we scroll down, it will load more elements. But there's a little bug right here. We can't scroll further down because for some reason it doesn't detect that we're at the bottom of the page. And this is because our observer component is actually not in our view right now. And a little fix for this is setting the height property on the observer class, and we can just make it 1 pixel. So then when we reload, we can scroll down and we will continue loading more and more elements. And at some point it will break because we have read all of the elements or all of the comments. We can't load anymore. But in production, when you make your own application, that shouldn't happen. You should add a couple of checks, or maybe decide what you want to do when you finish loading all elements and there are no more to be loaded. But you can see that we can scroll down and it loads pretty quickly. So just to wrap everything up, we create a observer, and whenever we intersect with this element, this component, we emit the intersect event. And then inside of our app, we listen for the intersect event, and whenever we intersect, we execute this method. And this method loads a couple of comments, adds it to our items, and then for each item we create a comment, and this comment just displays the information. So that is going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to drop a like, and if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next episode.